My name is Dubfire. I'm an Iranian immigrant, Iranian-American now. I came to the USA during the revolution in 1979, thinking that I would only stay for a little while in the Washington, D.C. area, which we emigrated to. And I ended up staying, my whole life, never going back. I guess I had a sort of artistic gene that was passed down to me from my father, who's like a poet. I never expected to have a career in music. Music was always in our family, mainly traditional classical Persian music, which was my first introduction. And then when I moved to the States, obviously what was being played on the radio was very important in developing my vast kind of musical background and knowledge. And then as I got older, I scratched deeper below the surface and discovered other genres and styles that I fell in love with. And then, a hobby turned into a career before I realized what was happening. Yeah, I was going to a community college because I didn't get into a university. And I was skipping class, going to a local record store where a lot of the, super famous like punk bands in the Washington, D.C. area at the time used to work at. And the store owners and the employees and all these people that were in the bands used to see me all the time. They would turning me on to different styles of music, the Wax Trax catalog, the On You Sound catalog. They were carrying alternative rock plus early electronic music, and also new wave and EBM and things like that. And I was just getting turned on by so many different genres of music. I had a day job, eventually, I met Sharam, and we decided to start like a duo. Prior to that, I was dabbling in production work with some friends, but nothing really materialized into like an identity, that I could kind of get behind and develop. But with Sharam, I realized, if we're a duo, it might be, a bit easier to kind of achieve whatever, musical goals we both had at the time. So we started Deep Dish in around 1991, 1992. Sharam and I were both working during the day, working on the Deep Dish material at night, not really sleeping for years until around 1995, when some remixes that we had done at the time started to blow up internationally. And so that was becoming more of a burden on our lives and specifically our day jobs. And we got to a point where we used up all of our sick time and all of our holiday time, and we were starting to miss, work a lot, starting to have very difficult conversations with our supervisors at work. And it got to a point where I think we were working on a remix for Janet Jackson for Simon Dunmore, who went on to form Defected Records. And we needed more time to work on the remix. And the only way to do that was to basically leave our day jobs. And I think that was, for both of us, the real turning point where the hobby became a career, a new chapter in our lives where we had to let go of the past and let go of our, reservations as far as maybe trying to have a career in dance music. We just decided to push full force ahead with making music full time and DJing full time. And it was a really scary time, but in hindsight, you have to take risks. I think it's, and we didn't have a plan B, I've often heard people say to really become successful at something, you can't really have a plan B. Because when you know that you have a plan B, you're not really fully immersed and focused on your plan A. Both of us knew, even though we came from Persian backgrounds, there was a lot of pressure from the family to have a more respectable career, but we knew, just because of how much we loved music and specifically electronic music, that we were so passionate about this one thing, we wanted to dedicate our whole lives to it, and we knew we were going to have more fulfilled lives if we could focus 100% on, our core passion. I didn't have any background knowledge. I didn't even have a computer, when I first started out. I had passion. I didn't really have equipment or resources, but I knew a lot of people who loved electronic music. And of course, like, you have certain friends that you meet that have like a home studio or have a synth or a drum machine. And I remember meeting John Selway. I guess it was like, even prior to meeting John Selway, I was in junior high school with an artist named BT, Brian Transo. And really, like, Brian was the one. He was classically trained. It was interesting because he was the popular kid in school, but he was like a new waver. He wasn't like a jock. And he had an amazing talent, classically trained pianist, and he had a bedroom full of equipment. And my mind was blown when I saw how much music equipment he had. And that forged a real deep friendship between us. And that's, I think, when I really first started dabbling in electronic music, like making electronic music. At that time, I was just like, playing around with making patterns, on the drum machine, or helping Brian, like, with synth parts, or we would just generally have jam sessions after school. Much later, I met John Selway, I guess it was like the late 80s, who also had a home studio. And by the late 80s, I was DJing, and I really was getting more serious about making music. And when Sharam and I started Deep Dish in 1991, it was John Selway who helped us make the first record. And I remember asking my mom for money to press the vinyl, because it was pretty expensive for someone like me at the time. And we were very surprised about how that did initially. And back then, you would hear about how well your music is being received internationally by way of like the magazines or reviews. And we started to see our record being reviewed or charted in different magazines. And that kind of motivated us to want to do a second record. And by then, Brian was really serious about getting something out. He was trying to get a pop career off the ground, which wasn't happening. And he thought maybe he could give the pop career a boost by, releasing a dance record on our label. So the BT record, I think it was called The Moment of Truth, was our second ever release. And for that one, we worked with Brian and John in their home studios. That vinyl release was also funded partly by the sales of the first record, additional resources coming from me and Sharam's families. So it was really like we had the family, even though they didn't think that it was a career necessarily at the time, our families were really supportive. They did put a lot of pressure on us to make sure that whatever we set our minds to was going to be successful financially. We didn't know, but we really believed by the attention that we got from the first two releases that we had a unique voice and a unique sound that was resonating with people, worldwide. We certainly weren't done. We were just beginning, and we decided to continue working on releasing music, not just from ourselves, but from other artists as well on the various labels that we had. And at the same time, we were getting, requests to do remixes. Yeah, everything just kind of snowballed into, the Grammy win that we had. It was just, I guess a valuable lesson at the time was to be really consistent, to never let too much time pass between releases or remixes, to always make sure that you have, something out there that people can talk about, not only play and appreciate, but, to give something for the fans, for your colleagues, for the industry to talk about. And I applied the same kind of mindset to my solo career when I went solo in about 2005, 2006. back in the early 90s, pressing vinyl, it wasn't like outrageously expensive, it was expensive, and you didn't need as much lead time as you do today. Nowadays, like, you know, depending on which pressing plant you're working with, sometimes they'll tell you like, you know, they need about six to 8 months or longer, which wasn't the case in the early 90s, because there was a lot more pressing plants around. You know, we were working, I think, with a pressing plant named A&R in Dallas, Texas, and they were the exclusive pressing plant for all the labels that we had. And you know, I remember fondly going to the post office and personally mailing the promos, you know, putting in the DJ feedback sheets that we would get faxed back. Like, I really miss playing vinyl. I mean, I've always been, like I said, I've always been kind of slave to technology and always tried to incorporate new technology into my DJ sets. But I do miss, especially when I see my friends like Sven, Väth, and other vinyl DJs, when they're playing vinyl, I do miss that selection process. Like when you're in the club, you know, that visual that you have that you don't have with laptop DJing or CDJ, where it's just text. You know, I really miss the visual component. The vinyl had a particular smell, had a particular feel, and it was something physical that you were holding in your hand. So, you know, while I lament the fact that I don't play vinyl anymore, I'm, you know, quite happy with my current setup. But yeah, there are times where, you know, just looking at text does your head in, and you're thinking about your vinyl days and how you miss, you know, playing that way. I think for me, like, yes, playing with a laptop and 4 decks and the controllers, it allows you a bit more, you know, creativity, like in terms of like, because especially now, everyone's a DJ, so you have to come up with ways to inspire yourself to keep doing it. In my case, for 30 plus years. So technology was always this thing that I looked at that always felt like, as it was changing, it was something new that I could latch onto, that I could learn and figure out a way to incorporate into my sets, to give my sets a particular sound and groove. You know, having the ability to have 4 decks allows you to layer different elements. You know, sometimes you can create a whole new track just by layering. Also, like, and it's kind of funny, but you know, it applies to DJs, especially the ones that play long sets, is like the ability to go to the bathroom when the bathroom is like quite far away from wherever it is you are on stage or in the DJ booth. And you know, you can set your decks up so that it'll loop when it gets to a particular point at the end of a track. So there's all this like freedom and creativity that playing, you know, the way I play allows. You know, and I know there's been a lot of controversy with certain vinyl enthusiasts maybe calling out sync button DJs, but like, we never look at it that way. I mean, we started, especially DJs my age, we started with vinyl. We know how to mix vinyl. There's nothing more that we need to prove when it comes to that. And using the sync button, multiple decks, controllers, just allow you to present music in a way that vinyl DJs can't. You know, with vinyl, it's great when you can actually hear when it's not perfect, you know, when you can hear someone mixing in a new record and sometimes it goes off and then it comes back on, and that's a nice feeling, both as a DJ when you're playing, but also as someone on the dance floor when you hear that. You know, you really hear the human kind of element in that. So that's great, but like, vinyl DJs also can't layer in the same way that we do, or use the technology, you know, that we have with controllers and running Ableton Live in the background with drum loops and doing, you know, you can even add like, you know, acid 303 synth lines, and there's a whole bunch of things that we can do that that the vinyl DJs aren't able to incorporate into what they do. So yeah, I think both can coexist in perfect harmony. Yeah, I mean, long sets for me aren't like this big talking point, because DJs from my generation, we often had residencies where there was only one DJ and you were playing from open to close. So like I always had residencies playing open to close. They weren't like 26.5-hour sets like I did at Sunwaves in Romania, but they were long. And so I grew up and I grew older in this industry playing long sets. So for me, long sets also allow you, not only are they the backbone of my like foundations in this industry, but also they allow you to flex your muscles a bit, like musically. You know, you can play a lot more variety. You can take much longer to tell the story that you want to tell. You can take risks knowing that you have enough time to, like, if it doesn't work, sometimes the risks fail, you know, but you have this freedom that you don't usually have in an hour and a half set. Those are the most difficult sets for me to prepare for, the ones that are very short. The longer ones just feel like more comfortable for me to get my head around creatively as a DJ. So I really welcome, you know, minimum 4-hour sets. I can't do the super long sets anymore because it's very difficult on the hearing as well. But yeah, I think 4 hours for me is like the standard bearer of where I'm comfortable. When I started, before I met Sharam, I was like an underground DJ. I was into dub reggae, underground hip hop, alternative rock. I was heavily into like, you know, the EBM stuff. Very, very left field music that like would make your parents angry, pretty much, if they heard it. And I was a punk rocker, you know, skinhead, mohawk, new waver, goth kid. I was all those things. And yeah, at Sharam was the complete opposite. So I think like us getting together, the sound of Deep Dish and what we achieved commercially was a combination of like our different, you know, personalities, you know, our different backgrounds. But after 15 years together, there were ideas within Deep Dish that I wanted to explore that I felt like maybe weren't appropriate musically to what we were doing, especially at that point where we started to become like really popular. The expectation from management and the fans and the record label was to keep churning out like, you know, hit pop dance songs. And I really needed to get back to my roots. I think Sharam also needed a break from me because we were fighting a lot. You know, a duo is a compromised vision and you're fighting each other. It's like a tug of war where you kind of meet in the middle, or who wins the argument ultimately determines the strength of the material that you end up putting out. But like, it was a constant battle between us. And I think we both got tired of fighting, and we both realized that we needed a break from one another. And it was a good opportunity for us to just go solo. And for me, it was very natural to go back to my roots in underground music. And I was heavily into what was happening with like minimal techno at the time. And I felt like there were certain ideas that weren't maybe being explored within minimal techno that I could contribute to. And I applied the same, you know, work ethic that I had when we started Deep Dish in terms of consistency, you know, getting the best music that I could out there. And I worked really hard for a good few years, you know, from 2007, 2009. There was a lot of remixes and original productions that came out that people were, you know, like intrigued by, I would say. Initially, I wasn't very embraced within techno music because it's hard to go from commercial back to underground. You can go the other way. But initially, it was like an uphill battle But that consistency ultimately paid off. And I think by 2009, when the Grindhouse remix came out, you know, a lot of people were realizing that, okay, this is a new direction in techno, minimal, whatever, that, you know, that's a breath of fresh air. And, you know, that gave me the confidence to keep doing it. And yeah, I stuck to it. I think like minimal techno, like I liked the space in the music. A lot of what we were working on in Deep Dish was just a lot of layers, you know. In many cases, towards the end of Deep Dish, we were layering different guitar parts. I was playing the guitar parts. There were layers of synth, of drums. There was just too much going on. Arranging became like a huge chore. You know, like we'd look at our arrange window and there was just so many elements. And I had this need to like strip everything back. But I found that difficult to do with the Deep Dish material that we were working on. And I was always like, even though like I wasn't playing techno, I mean, Sharam and I were always incorporating some techno into our sets. But, you know, I'd been longtime friends with people like Richie, Hawtin, and Sven, Väth, Chris Liebing. So I was always keeping tabs on what was happening in techno. And I also have roots in hip hop. I used to be a hip hop DJ, and I loved music that was funky. Where it kind of merged for me was like the need for space in the music and the funkiness that minimal techno at the time had. You know, the tempos weren't like they are today in techno. The tempos were like 128, 129. And the music, the swing was like really extreme. And so I really responded to that, and I felt like I could, you know, try to take it in other directions. And for me, yeah, I think I would say the funkiness and the space within minimal techno, that was like what was motivating me to want to get behind it. I mean, I think the obstacles for me in terms of being accepted into the techno community are still there. You know, I still don't feel welcome in certain circles, musical circles. Sometimes I'm really surprised by who reaches out and who I become friends with within the purest kind of techno circles. It's really like the purest kind of scenes that are very snobbish and very reserved in terms of like who they allow into their little club. You know, at the end of the day, it's like a club or lots of little clubs, you know, under the kind of techno banner. And you have these gatekeepers, and they decide whether you're cool enough, you know, or underground enough to be let in. And there's many clubs and festivals around the world where like I'm just not welcome. You know, no matter what I've achieved in my career, both in Deep Dish and because Deep Dish originally started out as like an underground act. So, you know, you have the whole Deep Dish career, which spans 15 years, and then you have like the Dubfire solo career, which spans 20 years. You know, I've been doing this for 35 years, and I'm still not, I don't feel welcome in certain circles. But that's okay, because, you know, that's life, and at the end of the day, like, it's not about like what club you're in. It's about like whether, you know, what is your legacy? What's the music that you're leaving behind? Are you proud of your legacy? And I think for me, that's my main motivation now, is like whatever I do, whether it's what I'm doing in Deep Dish again, or what I'm doing as a solo artist, is it the best, you know, that I have, you know, at that particular point in time, like in terms of like, you know, putting my creative foot forward and trying to say something new with each release. Is it my best work? So in that regard, I'm not in a rush to release anything mediocre. And I'm very much concerned with leaving behind a legacy that I can be proud of. And I don't really think about, you know, getting into this or that club, you know. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for a lot of the people that helped me along this journey. You know, in the early days, it was, you know, BT and John Selway and all the engineers that we worked with that I learned from, mentors that we had like Carl Craig, Danny Teneglia. And later on, when I became a solo artist, I was quite tight with Chris Liebing and Richie Hawtin and Sven Väth. And these people also kind of mentored me, you know, even though we were, you know, roughly the same age, I was coming into this like, you know, industry or a segment of the industry that I wasn't that familiar with at the time. I was coming into it. There were a lot of people that thought that my intentions weren't, you know, the good intentions. They didn't understand what a pop dance act was doing coming into their scene. And it was guys like Chris, Rich, and Sven that like really embraced and really, I think, appreciated and were inspired by like the solo work that I was doing at the time. And they gave me the kind of confidence and motivation to keep doing it. You know, they were the ones that, with their approval, I knew, you know, that I was on the right path. And if I didn't have anybody's approval, I'm not so sure if I would have continued. So I think, you know, human beings were all craving approval, whether it's, you know, family or friends or colleagues, you know, and really it took more than family and friends to motivate me to want to keep pushing forward and also doing it in a new way as a solo artist. And it was really the friendships within the industry that I forged that motivated me and continue to motivate me today to continue doing what I'm doing, both as a solo artist and within Deep Dish. Yeah, I mean, obviously when I went solo, I had to stop working with a lot of the bigger promoters that I was working with at the time for the Deep Dish shows. And initially they were like, they couldn't understand why I didn't want to work with them. But I had to shift my focus to working with like the right promoters who were doing the right events for the sound that I was developing at the time. So that was a struggle to make my team understand that like, yeah, you've been, you know, exclusively working with certain people in certain territories for a number of years, but, you know, I need to be working with these other people, and we need to do it in a way that's very respectful to the people that have supported us for all these years. Obviously, there were certain big promoters who were doing, you know, different genres, events that incorporated a variety of different genres. And so certain people I continued to work with, but the majority were new. And obviously I had to take a huge pay cut. But my motivation, again, wasn't money. It's never been money. It's always been like, you know, is this the right promoter to play for? Is this the right event to play for, or the right venue, or the right audience? Because DJs are, you know, there's some DJs that, maybe more than some DJs that are motivated by money, by the financial end of things. But for me, even if you get paid, and I know a lot of DJs that are like me in that way, but even if you get paid very little, if the gig is amazing, you're gonna feel like your soul will feel like more fulfilled and complete afterwards. But if the gig is horrible and you've made a lot of money, you're gonna complain to everybody who will listen about how bad the gig was, or how bad the promoter or the audience or whatever it was. So at the end of the day, for most of us, I think I can say it's about like having a great gig. And all the other things, all the other elements kind of, you know, fall in the background. You know, I think it's a very important element to what we do that kind of gets lost. You know, a lot of DJs nowadays, they don't want to go to dinner with the promoter. They don't want to, you know, go to sound check. You know, they want to come in like 10 minutes before with their entourage, get on stage, do their thing, and then they're in the car, you know, 10 minutes after they finish playing. And I've never been, like, I never feel really connected to anywhere if I don't have ample time, you know, to interact with the people that have brought me here, that have asked me to come and also with the fans afterwards. Basic knowledge of how to run a record label. You know, my intention when I went solo was not, you know, additionally to put pressure on myself by starting a record label. That kind of happened as a result of me initially sending my solo work out to different colleagues, different labels, and most of them were turning it down. And that forced me to want to start a label. I think the first 2 releases on the label were my own productions, Roadkill and Ribcage, which ultimately were snapped up by Armada. And Ribcage, for instance, was the first release on Loco Dice's Desolat label, but I had to give that to him like multiple times before he got it, you know? And, you know, so initially coming out the gate with my solo career, I did have to rely on, you know, what I'd learned up to that point within Deep Dish and how to run a label. It was also scary because I didn't have, you know, my creative partner. I didn't have another creative sparring partner that could help me in the studio if I was stuck on something, or that could, like, you know, help me navigate the industry and make the right business decisions. So I had to rely on myself. But ultimately, being able to be the sole decision maker, I think, was something I'd been craving for a long time up to that point. Like, being able to be very black and white with every situation, and in the studio creatively with all my decision making, to say yes or no and not have to answer to anybody. That was a very empowering feeling. It was something that I had been craving for, you know, for a very long time. And when I fully had that control, I was really able to, like, you know, transfer everything that I'd learned within Deep Dish and apply it to my solo career. I think, I don't know, when I reflect on my entire musical journey, it feels like no matter what we were doing musically, no matter what anyone's doing musically, at some point you're driven by, like, musical trends, you know? And you're trying to you're not trying to fully embrace those trends 100%, because when they stop being a trend, then you've kind of, what are you gonna do next? You know, you've lost your identity. So I think all of us, like, throughout our entire journey, you know, everyone obviously tries to have a signature, like, groove or tempo, that creative struggle that we all have between, like, juggling, whether it's on stage or in the DJ booth or in the, you know, studio, navigating groove, tempo, musical styles that are constantly evolving and shifting and changing, and how to infuse your own personality into all these, you know, variables that are constantly evolving. So some are more successful than others at doing that, at reinventing themselves. I always kept tabs on pop music. I really admired, like, someone like Madonna, who we were fortunate enough to work with briefly, in how she would evolve as an artist, you know, as a creative person. You know, not only her image, but her sound. To be able to capture a particular audience in a particular point in time and make that audience her audience. It's a lesson that I've tried to apply, you know, to what I've done as a solo artist, especially, you know, really paying attention to trying to have an image as well, you know, have an aesthetic, and to try and, you know, take my genre influences or what's happening, you know, in terms of whatever style of music everyone thinks is going to be like the next big trend or the current trend. Taking elements that I like, you know, throwing away the elements that I don't, and trying to come up with my own unique approach. And I feel like that's been maybe the secret to my longevity in the industry. A lot of people get into it, the game, you know, very short-sighted about like how long, first of all, like they want to be successful right away. They don't realize that sometimes it takes years to find your sound and your aesthetic and your look and everything. So I've been fortunate enough to have had ample time to develop myself as, you know, an artist within a duo and both as a solo artist as well, and to try to come up with my own unique twist on whatever the current trends are. And I think maybe that's been my motivation. I'm also very motivated by what's happening, you know, today and tomorrow. What I think is going to happen, you know, how I think someone is going to use certain studio technology or performance technology or visual technology. And so I think, yeah, that keeps me motivated. Yeah, I think in 2025, as a solo artist, I feel more of a responsibility to educate the audiences on, like, you know, real techno, for lack of a better expression, because there's a lot of people throwing around the word techno and applying it to what we all within techno feel like is more relatable to like EDM, you know? And then there's a lot of people that are pushing the limits of BPM. There's a lot of people that are pushing the limits of BPM and, you know, just obnoxiously loud, annoying music and calling it techno. And I feel a great sense of responsibility to educate the audiences to what I feel real techno is. As a solo artist, I'm really conscious of continuing to make my mark, you know, within this genre that I love so much, that I hold so dear to my heart. And there's a lot of, you know, I have a lot of motivation in doing that, because there's a lot of amazing young producers who are making really, really forward-thinking techno that isn't what's the current trend right now. You know, as a duo within Deep Dish, like we're more excited than ever with the evolution of progressive house, indie dance, deep house, Afro house, everything that's happening, which is, you know, very, very musical. And so that's a real motivation for me, and that's a real positive element to our industry. I used to make really long tracks, 8+ minutes. In some cases, you know, I can think back to my solo career, and also like early on in Deep Dish, I remember we did a remix for The Shaman, which was 17 minutes long. I think we did a remix for Daje, which was 18 minutes long. As a solo artist, I was doing like 8 to 12 minute tracks and remixes. And nowadays, pretty much everything I'm getting is between 4 and 5 minutes, which is unbelievable, because radio edits were in the 3 to 4 minute range. And now radio edits are like in the 2 minute, you know, to 2.5 minute range for streaming services. And yeah, it's all part of the new industry that we have, you know, which is driven by, you know, music streaming platforms and social media. And obviously that's altered the way musicians and DJs and producers like make music. And some become, you know, more than a DJ or a producer. They try to become a personality. You know, someone's quite active on social media, and they hope that's going to drive, you know, what they do as so-called DJs. And at the end of the day, I think it just like, it's a sign of the times. It's like the era that we're living in, and the fact that everybody wants to become rich and famous, whether they admit it or not. You know, everybody wants to be famous, because when you're famous, you have access, and when you're rich, of course, you don't have the pressure of money. And I think ultimately, whether everybody wants to admit it or not, that's become like a big motivation for a lot of people. I mean, the way my approach is, like, if I'm being booked to play a club, especially a club, I try to play as long as I can. If it's a club that's like known for their sound system and atmosphere, I'll ask to play an open to close set. And a lot of times the promoters are very happy to allow me that freedom. And when I do that, and that's me dictating my terms, you know. And I think when you are in a position where you can dictate your terms, then you feel like you have the freedom to play longer tracks, play longer sets, take your time getting from point A to point B to point C, taking people on a journey. And I think it begins with us as DJs to not play the game that everyone else is playing, you know, to dictate our own terms. Some levels it's about receiving from the interaction between your audience. You know, there is a give and take, but really it's about like having one foot on the dance floor, one foot in the DJ booth. It's about playing music in a way that turns you on. And hopefully what turns you on, we've all believed, you know, getting into it, what turns us on will turn on, you know, the audiences in some way, or some of the audiences. And I think those are the true motivations that I would suggest younger people who are getting into this industry to kind of, you know, try to latch onto. Right now, I'm in the middle, as a solo artist, I'm in the middle of working on a bunch of remixes. I just finished one for a guy named Petru, who won Richie Hawtin's scholarship fund that he set up. So I'm doing that to help his career. He's a very interesting guy. He's really into modular synthesis, and reached out to me to do a remix. And, you know, I knew that he'd won the scholarship, and his heart's in the right place, and I wanted to help him. So I just finished a remix for him. And after that, I've got to do a remix for Bjarki, for his Bang, classic Bang song. And I have to select something for one of my favorite techno artists named Ignis, and do a remix for Ignis. And as far as Deep Dish, and I'm back again in the saddle, navigating between Deep Dish and the solo work. With Deep Dish, where my main motivation is right now. We're releasing our second single today. It's called Dreaming, and the reaction so far has been amazing. We recently played Glastonbury, and we have a big rollout plan for all the Deep Dish material that we've been recording over the last year and a half. We have about an album's worth of material that we're gradually, every few months, sharing with the rest of the world, and the feedback has been great so far. So ultimately that will turn into like an album and a live show. But right now we're very excited to be back working together again after achieving what we wanted to, you know, accomplish as solo artists. Having a partnership, creative partnership, is very much like a marriage or a relationship. We've often talked about it being like a marriage. Sometimes it's a dysfunctional marriage, but we've, you know, having had the freedom and time to explore our solo careers, you know, having had success individually in our solo careers has given us, like, you know, the opportunity to have more respect for one another, I think. We don't question each other as much. It doesn't mean we don't fight. We still fight to get our vision across. Sometimes it's something really trivial. Sometimes it's a kick drum or a hi-hat, or an arrangement issue. And other times it's, you know, it's It's more like broad creative ideas about like what direction we need to take deep dish in. But ultimately, the arguments are a lot more civilized and sensible. And we have a great management team right now who sometimes have to mediate between us. But generally speaking, we're very positive in how we're working creatively together. And I attribute that to all the things we learned on our journey, apart as solo artists. We don't both need to win now. It's about like what's best for deep dish, and there's more noise now with feeling like you have to do this or that, like for social media or whatever. Like you have all these other parameters that influence artists today, and I think for us, what we try to do with each, track that we work on is like, is this the best piece of music that we can make, with this vocalist or with this, genesis of an idea. And ultimately, we want to leave behind an even bigger legacy than we did. We want to make a bigger mark than we did. And I think that's our motivation. And we let everybody else think about like, streaming and social media and that whole game that is very uninteresting to us. For us, growing up in DC, we were very close to New York, not that far from what was happening in Chicago. We always looked at New York and Chicago and Detroit, and also what was happening obviously in London. Those areas, those regions seemed to be where all the action was at, like where all the creativity was coming from. And we never thought of ourselves, like we always felt inferior in some way living in Washington, DC, and having a record label there and a booking agency and putting out our music from, our headquarters in DC. Like we always felt a bit like, I guess inferior is the best word, to everyone else who was living in all these other cooler places where the musical output was far greater than what was coming out of DC. In DC, we had like, obviously punk music, which influenced a whole, generation or two of artists. And we had like, go-go and we had certain artists like Vaughn Mason or the Basement Boys that were making amazing like early house music. But we never we just always felt like a bit of an outsider. Then I think that motivated me to want to live in Europe, I think was the main reason why I planted my roots here in Barcelona. I think in many ways, what kept the scene alive on an international level was Sónar. Well, Sónar, I think, started in '94. I think Sharam and I first played Sónar as Deep Dish in 1998. And I think Sónar really has been the reason, like the creative kind of epicenter, musically speaking, at the center of Barcelona, why people love Barcelona, why people come here. A lot of people, from around the world will come for Sónar, because Sónar had something to offer for everyone. And a lot of times it was artists who don't have mainstream exposure. Sónar has always been like a very alternative, very cool, very hipster kind of festival, and their lineups year after year have always reflected that. And I think initially Sónar was, what I looked at in terms of like, identifying with like a musical kind of scene. And they've really been instrumental in developing and preserving the musical scene for decades now. And later you had like Primavera sound. Then you had Elrow. Elrow came at everything with a completely different, more of a circus, aesthetic and mentality. And that gave the industry a boost here. And then you had Brunch. Brunch are kind of like you know, an alternate to Sónar on some levels. And they came at it with like a whole new concept. Sundays during the day, ends at 10 p.m. It's really manageable for a lot of people to attend the events. And it has a look, just like Sónar has a look, has an aesthetic. Elrow has an aesthetic. Brunch has their aesthetic. Primavera has theirs. And I think, you know, you have all these creative forces that have been, you know, developing the scene here all these years that are very, very respected and supported by the audiences. And I think that's been one of the main reasons why I've felt comfortable being here. I've often said, like, to the next generation, like, take your time. Not everything you produce needs to be released. Not everyone needs to be a DJ. There are other things that you could do with your life. We have too many DJs. Really try to collaborate with the right people. There's nothing wrong with collaboration. If you don't have either the technical skills or the creative skills, you know, try to figure out what it is that you're good at and what you're lacking, and try to gravitate towards others and work with others who can fill those gaps, you know, and make sure your motivation is real, you know, like why and ask yourself, like, why are you getting into it, this game, you know, like what is it that you're trying to accomplish? You know, set short-term and long-term goals, and, you know, try to play long sets, because that's the only way you can learn and understand what DJing truly is, you know, and what taking people on a journey truly is by, you know, playing long sets. Anybody can play short sets.